All right, fantastic. I now have the privilege to introduce one of our international board members, Allison Spray, who is the Managing Director of Data and Analytics at H&K Strategies. And I have had the pleasure of hearing Allison speak before, and she consistently brings new content and new perspective forward to give us all a different way of thinking about things. And knowing that she's working with, so many big brands and so many people on a regular basis, it gives us that new approach to it of being able to give some new data behind that and perspective. So Allison, thank you so much for joining us. The time is yours.
Amazing, thank you. All right, I have succeeded in my first task, which was getting on a stage for the first time in 4 years in heels and not falling on my face. So thank you. Clicker. What I'm going to talk to you about today, I hope will act as a bit of a connection point for a lot of what we've heard over the past 2 days. Because what I'm focused on at the minute, what I'm passionate about, is this intersection between analytics, behavioral science, and data science. So quite the act to follow from Conversian and a lot of the folks we've heard about today. But I hope it's something that gives you some really tangible ways that you can think about bringing it forward in your organization, and shares a little bit about what we're doing at H&K. So I'll start just with some scene setting, because I think it's worth understanding why we're here talking about this. And I think to me it really is this question of whether you're ready or not, the augmented future is already here. Executives are afraid of going out of business if they don't think now about how they prioritize AI. Marketing and sales departments are having the same conversations, and in fact that is higher than any other sector when you look at studies. And if you are here, if you're online and you are new to this industry, know that there are 97 million people who are going to be needed to facilitate different jobs specific to AI, machine learning, engineering by just 2025. So this is phenomenal growth that we're talking about. And I said earlier this year at another conference, if you don't like Excel, I have bad news for you. And that is still true. And I think, as PR professionals, as measurement professionals, we need to face the frog in boiling water problem, which is that for far too long we've ignored the kind of creeping growth of technology. I think we've seen that in lots of different ways. I think you can talk to PR professionals who used to own influencer marketing wholesale, and we are all seeing the media buying agencies creeping in with different models, different ways of doing that are leveraging technology. We can't just be the dog in the burning house, if you follow the meme. But why else should you care? Because it's not just scaremongering. I have enough behavioral scientists in my team to tell me that that is not the only lever that I should pull. It's not just about driving efficiencies. A lot of what I'm looking at in my own business, a lot of what we've heard about, does that, and it does it really well. There's lots of different ways that we can look at using particularly simple machine learning techniques to save us time and cost in the work that we're doing. But for a lot of businesses, I think we've just seen one excellent example of it, technology is helping us open entirely new markets. It's going to shift the way in which we see the world. And I think for all of us, there's a fascinating opportunity to be at the forefront of that. And at the same time, it's a fantastic opportunity to collaborate. So whether we're talking about leveraging that wealth of data to create better relationships with our clients, to actually talking with them about the data that matters in the boardroom, or we're working with our sister agencies and actually engaging around how does PR show up in mixed media models, what other ways of understanding reputation and sales can we start to leverage, all of that becomes much more possible when we get more tech literate. And the other thing I would say is It's not something that we're going to do alone. It's not something that agencies will lead. It's not something that data partners will lead. It is about a partnership. And I think we're at a really interesting moment in thinking through what that partnership looks like and how we structure it so that the whole of the industry benefits. So I'm hoping that you've bought the premise, that all of you are happy to not be boiling frogs or burning dogs or whatever mixed analogy it is that I've come up with. So assuming that you have, what are a few more tangible examples right now of how data science, machine learning, and AI are actually helping PR? And I have kept these just to the sort of insights and measurement space. Obviously, there's lots more happening if you want to look into content creation. But I'm not touching that, not today. So the first is just how we can get to faster analysis. You know, again, Giles, another shout out. Brainwatch, obviously here today. There are tools like Iris, which you can see pictured here, that have been around for a while now, but actually there's lots of examples of simple machine learning and AI that can help you surface trends within large data sets. And I think you might not even realize that you're making use of some of these tools. They're not always marketed as machine learning or AI. They might even just be sort of supervised learning models. They could be supercharged regression analyses, or they could be a more advanced AI that you're using. But ultimately, all of these are about how can you understand what's happening in a large data set quickly? Because I'm sure all of us have had that task of, I need to know what all of this means now, not in 5 days when we've had a chance to read all of the tweets. The second is sort of the who, what, and where. I think machine learning and AI can help to classify data sets as well, where you think you might have previously approached a problem of understanding how a brand or an individual is mentioned across coverage using Boolean language searches. Maybe you can use entity training instead, so something that can offer better ways of understanding that who, what, and where. Because those are models that are trained to recognize context rather than just looking at keywords. And if anyone in this room has ever been asked to monitor a generic brand name, Apple, I hope you can appreciate why that matters. And the last one, for me, is probably the most interesting, are things like cluster analysis and unsupervised learning models. Because when I look at PR, these are tools that can help us look at the underlying structures of your data, rather than looking for preordained outcomes, as in those previous two examples. And given the importance of insight to a lot of analyst job roles, and the fact that PR operates in a space that is simply far less defined than a lot of our marketing colleagues, I hope you'll agree with me that those are just really, really fascinating. So I thought I'd share two examples, kind of in the same vein. One speaks to the partnerships piece. How we're using a third-party AI, NLP, to augment our own capabilities in-house. We have a product called Space Plus. Do feel free to look at it on our website. But effectively what we've done is partnered with Quid to better understand the media landscape and help us to segment specific conversations. So they have an NLP engine that helps you to do that. We then look at the topics and stories that have currency with the media and our target audiences. So very similar graphic to what we heard Paul talking about earlier with NewsWhip. And then we look at competitive advantage, which is an algorithm we've built external to the platform and custom to us. And we take all of those things together to help our clients understand and predict what are the highest potential spaces to own. So how can we answer that question, the perennial question of, where's my white space? What is it that my brand is going to talk about? And another example, I think we often think about this and it becomes this weird discussion with account teams where, well, you can only use it for data questions, but actually, even the basics of media relations can benefit from the addition of big data. And when you use a data-informed approach, for example, to think about media identification, it allows you to target outlets that are going to drive impact for specific KPIs and for specific campaigns. So for us, we've started building a thing called smart media lists, which actually analyze and score the media against 7 different metrics, the names of which are on the screen. And that might seem like a lot, and I won't lie and say that it's a small undertaking. But what it allows us to do is pivot based on the objectives of a brief. So for example, if we're thinking about thought leadership, if we're looking for cultural cut-through or SEO value, we're able to actually pivot those rankings and give our clients just a more tailored list. And all of that is well and good to say, but ultimately, data needs to do more. It needs to do more than tell us what's happened, or maybe better put, we need to be doing more with the data than stating what's already happened. There's so much occurring in the world of prediction, and where we have these feature-rich data sets, we can and should be doing more to deliver just better results to our clients. I think there's a few key questions for you to consider to help you decide where you can best invest. These are the same things that I am thinking about constantly at the moment. The first is just where can we leverage machines to help us make better or faster or more accurate predictions? So if you are repeatedly asked the same questions by your clients, or you have tasks that currently require just tons of manual hours from your team, which could really easily be predicted by past events, those are opportunities for you to think about bringing in machine learning or AI, because it can probably do that job better than a human. The second is to think about what data you would need, or what you already hold that's appropriate for that task. I think PR feels this particular question more acutely than perhaps some of our marketing colleagues, because we haven't had necessarily the historical rigor of collecting a lot of data. Not true everywhere, but certainly something that I see a lot. But it's something that we can do. It's not insurmountable, and where we can, we should. And the last question, perhaps, is the most important, which is just where does the interaction between the human and the machine need to occur? Because if we want to predict well with the help of machine learning and AI, we need to have those predictions that can also be explained, perhaps imperfectly, with the help of behavioural and other social sciences. Which is an excellent segue into where I'm going next, and this lovely slide. The image, which I hope you can see, which illustrates that people act in ways that are surprising and seem irrational. Taking the escalator to the gym. Can't say I haven't done that. Consumers don't always switch to a better product. They don't always switch to a cheaper product. Employees are often resistant to change that would benefit both them and their employer. And almost all of us do not save, exercise, or eat as healthily as we should. And as we've heard, I think, multiple times today, we lie. We lie constantly to ourselves and to other people. Part of that is a problem of how we perceive how human beings think. We think we all approach the world like Sherlock Holmes. And the reality is that most of us approach decision-making like Homer Simpson's. And behavioral scientists would kind of commonly understand that as two parallel systems. We have our system one way of thinking, which is automatic, uncontrolled, effortless, associative. That's your Homer Simpson brain. And we have our system two brain, which is reflective and controlled, effortful, slow. And while we think we mostly use system two, the reality is that most of us spend most of our time making automatic decisions, a fast gut reaction. And this is true even if you are talking about important decisions, such as how we looked after our health or what we're going to do at work. So just because a decision is important doesn't mean we use the right kind of thinking. So how can we start to overlay behavioral science on top of all of this technology to get us to a place where we're having really useful data-led campaign planning? I think, to me, there's a four-step method that we use that helps us make sure that we're applying it consistently, which I thought I would share. The first starts with just defining the specific opportunity. We often work with organizations to tackle really complex challenges. I think Claire had a fantastic example of that yesterday. I hope you're all able to hear her speak, or if not, you can watch it on catch-up. But how do you motivate patients to engage with a new or better treatment? How do you encourage those people to engage in their workplace? And what might encourage customers to test the newest kind of innovative technologies? Each of those challenges involve multiple actions by multiple people. And our first step is to break down, so we're clear what behaviors we're seeking to change and by whom. And the reality is that a lot of those are likely to be separate behaviors happening in parallel. But you have to start by defining that specific opportunity. Then we move on to fully understanding the challenge. So how can you actually understand from real life human behavior, how you can fully scope that out from the perspective of the people whose behavior you want to change. So this is where we've heard a lot about ethnography, actually going out and speaking to the people you want to see, understanding that gap between what people say and what people actually do. Because too often the strategies that you see in communications are designed based on assumptions of what influences people without a true understanding of all of the factors that are at play. And this is particularly true when we start to think about that automatic system one process thinking. Then you design your new solutions. So how can you use behavioral science to design an intervention? So there's lots of different ways you can use that. We have what we call our SMARTer model. I'm sure Claire will have talked yesterday about the CALM-B model. If you've not heard about that, that's one that's very, very popular. It's not about which model you use. It's about making sure that you're really systematic in understanding what your intervention is going to look like and how you're going to track and collect the information. Because the final step is the most important, and that is testing and learning. I think we've all heard about failing fast this week. That is true regardless of whether you're doing something that exists in a survey or looking at social data or looking at broader media. But you have to test whether what you're doing has actually changed behavior. You have to look at whether it works. And while you can have a campaign that's grounded in evidence, you can do all your research in the front, if you don't test it, you don't actually know, because even the best scientists in the world are sometimes wrong, and sometimes people will still surprise you. So that's a lot from me. At the end of the day, the last thing standing between all of you and another coffee break. So I will summarize 3 points to think about when you think about how you can start to leverage these different complementary skill sets. The first is strategy. Whether you're talking about AI or technology solutions or data more broadly, none of this is a magic wand. You need to understand the problems that exist in your business and in your clients' businesses, and then identify the tools to solve them. You can't just go straight to the shiny new algorithm. The second is people. How are you supporting that strategy? How are you helping people to adopt a different way of working? I think all of us actually do this a lot who work in measurement, because we are constantly trying to get the PR industry to measure more, to engage more around measurement. So it's about applying those skills to a new challenge and thinking about that critical upskilling that needs to take place in PR teams. We all need to be better fluent in data, and we need to be more fluent in technology as well. Which brings me on to the third point, technology. So how do you bring in the right technologies that are going to allow you to collect, process, and analyze that data in ways that are ethical and compliant? You have to use all three together for this to be successful, but I am so excited to see what is going to come next, because there's some phenomenal stuff out there. I'm excited to see what we're going to build. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Allison. Do you have a chance to sit down with us?
Well,
Have a moment in the white chairs. It feels like a very nice transition to a coffee break so that everyone is hydrated and ready for the hard-hitting interview of Giles later this afternoon. You've done a lot of work in this area. What are some of the go-to resources that you use to stay on top of some of these trends and the technology?
Well, I think the first thing is admitting what you don't know, which is so hard. It's really difficult. I'm very fortunate. I'm in the middle of doing a postgraduate diploma at Oxford in AI for business, which has opened my eyes to a world of things that I did not know existed. But it's also opened my eyes to the kind of conversations I need to be having with my team. There are loads of folks in our organizations actually who already know about some of these technologies. It's about not being afraid to say, especially if you're a senior leader, I'm not familiar with what this is. Can you help me understand? When you say it's unsupervised, what does that mean? Because to a lot of the conversations we've had today, being able to admit you don't know is important, because it also means you can know when to bring in people to help you unpick some of those challenges, and also test some of the technologies that are being brought to all of us. Because while many are very scrupulous vendors who will tell you exactly how accurate their predictions are, there's a lot out there that isn't. So we need to make sure that we can BS detect, as one of my professors says.
Reverse mentoring and leadership are really powerful, and really it takes a lot of EQ that sometimes is lacking. So I think that's, again, another social behavior that you're able to tap into because you're studying and you're so close to it. When you talk about the process that you all have with your system, how does that work with your clients? I mean, are they all like, well, of course, or is there that, convince and convert still that you have to take in that onboarding process?
I think anytime you're doing something different, there's always going to be, I would probably think of it more as an education in helping people understand why are we bringing these particular individuals to a room, particularly because all of this has costs associated with it, right? None of us are working for free. But I think having people who are clearly skilled experts in front of clients is so critical. It's a mistake that I think we made for a few years, if I'm honest, at H&K, was not being willing to put those behavioral scientists in front of clients because we were afraid they were too wonky, or being afraid to put data analysts in front of clients because they, were introverts. Don't be afraid. Sometimes, yes, the meetings will be a bit awkward, but it's good for the folks that you have in your organization to get that exposure, and it really helps clients have trust in what you're building.
And are you building those teams that way on a global scale, or is it regionally centric? What does that look like at H&K?
So the Data by Science portfolio at the moment sits in London. We are a pilot project, but I know, because I'm constantly speaking with the other data leads from across the globe, that it's something that we're exploring. For example, in our Middle East hub, they also have a handful of behavioral scientists. Our hub in Canada has lots of data scientists, so it's more all of us kind of working together, testing and learning and figuring out what works, and then understanding where we can expand at scale.
What's your advice for the other agency professionals? And then the second part of that, you can think about, what's your advice for customers who are being introduced to this model? What are the questions that they should be asking for purchase consideration?
Let's see, to the other agency partners. John Meakin and I, who heads the PR agency group within AMEC, have talked a lot about the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. As much as I am fiercely competitive, I think for all of us, thinking about how we adopt these technologies, thinking about how we talk about them to our clients, it's going to benefit all of us in the long run. So let's think about how, industry bodies like this, like AMEC, can help us to do that and can help us upskill. In terms of clients, I think AI is a tricky one because it is something where you need to have a level of understanding of AI to be able to scrutinize AI. So I say, to the same kind of compliment I've made about myself, you have to know what you don't know. You have to be a little bit open about that. Once you do feel like you've got a little bit of a grasp, I think for buyers, it's important to be able to understand the unintended consequences when we talk about either using behavioral science or technology. Because depending on how these systems are built, depending on the assumptions that go into them, all of that has sort of downstream effects. And it's fine as long as all of us know what the potentials are and the potential outcomes. But I think if you just go in thinking, well, it's technology and you'll snap your fingers and it will work.
Magic.
Unfortunately, that's where things tend to go wrong, because it's really easy for someone to tell you that they have an NLP that's going to, code your content by topic. But if that's something that every client they have can edit, your data could be massively different today to tomorrow. So you just need to know what those assumptions are, I think, and that's a really good starting point.
Excellent. We have time for one question from the audience. If you dare. Ansi? Is that your hand? Oh, Giles Palmer. I'm sure he's hoping that you'll then ask him a lovely question later.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Giles.
Good to see you. Biggest mistake, biggest learning, if put it that way.
Oh, yeah, Daryl, you've really opened the floodgates for this now at AMEC conferences. Thanks for that. The biggest mistake. I didn't listen to some of my team early enough. I've had particularly one member of my team who has been trying to bend my ear for 18 months about the investments we needed to make in the technology space, and I just didn't give it enough attention, particularly coming off maternity leave and COVID and all the other excuses I can think about. But that was the mistake, was not being open enough to listen. And I think that Marianne talked about that earlier, right? The openness to new opportunities. That so far is the biggest mistake. I'm sure I'll have some more once we start really implementing some of this stuff.
But now you have that good signal when you're back in the office and they do come into the office, you turn and you tell them right away that you just need 1 second, not the partial body, so that they know that you're there with them and it's important.
It's true. My team love that they now can sit next to me and I can constantly turn around and pepper them with questions. It's their favorite bit of being back in.
I'm sure, racing back to the office for it. Allison, thank you so much. What wonderful thought leadership that you always put forward, and we appreciate you, and we appreciate your volunteering and everything that you do to help lead the organization. So thank you so much. Big round of applause for Allison.